Call to order. This is a special meeting of the Joliet City Council, December 2014, regarding the budget. Mayor Tom Girani presiding.
Start with roll call. Mayor Girani.
Here.
Gavin. Here. Councilman Girl.
Here.
Councilman Hug. Councilman McFarland.
Here.
Councilman Morris.
Here.
Councilman Odekirk.
Here.
Councilwoman Coleman. Here. Councilman Turk.
Here.
Before we start, I want to make a little comment. After the budget was given to us, put on display, I read about the NOPT and the residents' concerns. So a few days ago, I met with Jim Hock about it and see if we could find some money. I met again this morning with Jim. We had a little discussion, and Jim, maybe you want to elaborate on what we discussed this morning?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor, members of council. Before we get started with the presentation, I want to let you know there, first of all, I read in the newspaper myself, Cunningham neighborhood was concerned about NOPT officer, and I'm sure a number of neighborhoods where officers are currently assigned are wondering about the continuation of the program. The officer in that neighborhood area will be retiring in January, and the funding is still in the budget, and that person will be replaced, and there will be an officer in that neighborhood. The other thing is that during the review of the budget, there was a little mix-up where staffing got requested under capital from the police department, so I missed some of their staffing requests. So at this point in time, I am recommending, in addition to the positions that I presented to you at the last meeting, the addition of 3 more neighborhood-oriented policing team officers, one which would be specific to the mall area. Second officer would be over on the east side neighborhoods, and then the other one in the far west neighborhoods. In addition to the 11 officers we have currently, when we're adding 3 more, I am recommending an additional sergeant position that would be over the NOPT officers team.
Is this 2 sergeants?
This would be in addition to the training sergeant. There'd be a second sergeant promotion. The other thing is I've talked to the fire chief since last week in regards to the fact that we've got a full complement and the amount of overtime there, so I'm recommending a reduction of $600,000 in the overtime to bring that down to $1.7 million. Now, the addition of the positions, the 3 NOPT and the 1 sergeant position will add about $403,000 to the budget.
Also, if I may, I talked to Chief Formals on the likelihood of keeping all of our ambulances in service. Joe, you want to elaborate on that?
Yes, we're gonna start off 2015 with all 9 of our ambulances staff. We're gonna be staffing ambulance 9 on a daily basis, and as I talked to the mayor and the city manager, we will be reviewing our overtime, and at the mid-year budget review, we'll revisit this and see if we need to make any adjustments with the staffing then for the vehicles. But that's the goal starting January 1.
Now, I want to call this a net positive of $200,000, but we're still using in excess of $8.7 million of our unassigned fund balance. So it's not really a savings per se. It just reduces the amount of the fund balance that we'd need to use.
Okay.
At this point, I'm going to ask Mr. Gadati to go through the details of the proposed budget.
Excuse me, Jim.
Sure.
Mr.
I'm
Councilman
a little
Farley.
confused. Chief, your microphone, it's a little hard to exactly hear what you're saying back there. I apologize, but I'd like to, if you can recap that, we're decreasing the overtime in the fire budget by $600,000.
Yes.
And in the
Adding-
budget, we just hired 4 fire personnel. We're funding the SAFER grant to renew that, correct?
Yes.
and we're saying January 1, with the reduced amount of dollars in the overtime budget, we're going to be able to staff ambulance 9. Do we have a projection of how long that's going to be?
Well, again, that all goes hand in hand with sick and workman's comp issues for the year with the 209 firefighters full staffing. That gives us 10 floaters per shift. So what the calendar has is 9 and 10 man days off for the most part for Local 44. So it's all predicated on the number of people that the sickies and long-term workman's comp that we have. So as I said, what the plan is to start January 1 with that ambulance 9 being staffed every day. We will monitor the overtime on a daily basis and give you updates. And if we have to do some adjustments throughout the year, we'll do that. It's going to be a month-by-month process, though.
Can I ask why this hasn't been done in the past?
Well, in the past, we have not had, up until recently, we have not had 209 firefighters. We've been, we've had the safer people, then we had retirements, so our staffing went up and down. We've finally just gotten full staffing. Our final guy, our 209th guy, went through the academy and graduated the end of October here, so we've just assigned him to shift. So going into the next year, going into 2015, we should have all of our personnel in place for the entire calendar year and be able to adjust that way.
I just want to make sure this is not political rhetoric like some of my colleagues used when we talked about restore NOPT. I think it's imperative, especially in this budget. I think my fellow council member in District 1 and what I've heard is that folks that are serviced normally by Ambulance 9 want it back in service. So I want to make sure that this is not just something that we're throwing out there, and we're coming back in February, March, and we depleted the amount of dollars that are in that overtime budget. So I think it's important that we keep an eye on that, and I ask that the Finance or the Public Safety Committee keep an eye on that, please.
Mayor,
Yes.
I apologize, everybody, if it's going to be redundant for you right now. I came into the tail end of Jim Hawk's, got here late from work. Jim, you and I talked last week after we saw the initial budget, and I had my concerns about the police staffing as well as public works staffing. And you said you were still working on the budget.
Right.
So we originally, last Tuesday, we saw one police hire, which would be the sergeant. We are now going to hire 3 patrolmen, am I right, and 1 more sergeant.
Yes.
So we're going from 1 to 5.
Yes.
Okay, now unfortunately at this point, we're still going to have, I shouldn't say unfortunately, we're still going to increase the depleted staff of the public works by 4.
Yes.
And I believe we're hiring 1 or 2 more in the salt water and sewer side to get 3 crews out instead of 2. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so that's good movement too. And then if I understood you when we talked, and I appreciate that you were responsive to my concerns on the policing, and then of course we most recently had some other incidents to remind us that we still need to get back to full staffing there. With that in mind, if I understand right, you found in the budget you're able to, since we're adding more personnel to Public Works, for now 4, you're also going to be adding an additional truck in addition to what was originally in the budget.
Yeah, when we go through a little more
Okay.
detail, I'll expound on those programs, and we can talk about that some more.
And I appreciate what you were able to do with increases in personnel in those key positions.
Thank you.
Jim, Councilman Hung mentioned the 4 maintenance worker positions. I have a note here that those are part-time positions. Is that true?
What I had,
4 maintenance worker positions, roadway for tree trimming.
right, and those are full-time positions.
Those are full-time.
Yes. I also proposed 2 part-time positions to shuttle the vehicles back and forth
Right.
to the mechanics over in the fleet maintenance division, so the mechanics aren't spending their time out there doing the shuttling, and they can focus their time on mechanics work.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I would like to start the presentation tonight for the 2015 proposed budget to look at the city as a whole. This spreadsheet, which is in your budget, presents every single fund, the expenditures and revenue proposed for every single fund. And there are no funds within the city, operational or otherwise, that are not in this budget. We currently have 15 operational funds. 13 of those funds are what's known as governmental funds, and they operate on a modified accrual basis. We have 2 funds that are enterprise funds, the Water and Sewer Fund and the Parking System Fund. And those are enterprise funds and operate much as a private business would work. In other words, all the expenditures in those funds are covered by revenues from those funds. The big difference between the Water and Sewer Fund and the Parking System Fund is the Water and Sewer Fund uses an accrual method of accounting, which contains depreciation, payments for long-term debt, which do not appear in governmental funds. Governmental funds use a modified accrual basis of accounting, which captures financial transactions up to about 60 days after the end of the fiscal year. On this budget, our total budget for all funds is $279,000, $275 million. Sorry, I missed a few decimals there. And you can see that number in the bottom right-hand corner of the spreadsheet. All those numbers go right back to each separate individual fund. This budget was built from the bottom up. So every single line item that we went through with each department is in this budget. However, if you do not wish to look at line items, you can go to the divisions, and from there, you can go to each department to get a total departmental budget. And from the departmental budgets, those are all folded into the total fund budgets. So as you look in your budget, you can look at the fund as a total, or you can go down to each individual line item for each individual division within each fund. The next spreadsheet that I show is the fund balance and net position of each fund. The item here is our current budget shows our fund balance for all funds to be about $50 million. We have a planned use of fund balance of about $6 million spread over all funds. So we are planning on using some of our reserves to balance this budget this year.
A quick question before we keep moving forward. Jim,
Yes.
JG, Jim Gadati. Just explain a little bit more detail the zero balance on the Water and Sewer Improvement Fund, how that works on the revenue side.
The Water and Sewer Improvement Fund is a capital for all the water and sewer. So the funds in the Water and Sewer Operating Fund are used to fund those capital purchases. So those capital purchases at the end of the year will not be expensed. They will be depreciated. So it's presented in a manner just so you know which projects we're spending money on. However, if we buy a water main, let's say, it will not be expensed in the annual report. It will be expensed over the life of the asset. And typically, water and sewers are depreciated over a 30 to 50-year spread.
So while we will show certainly expenditures on the Water and Sewer Improvement Fund, 16 million, for instance. We're not showing the revenues because it comes out of the general fund of the Water and Sewer.
Correct.
Got it.
Correct. That cash will come out of the Water and Sewer Fund. However, why it's not expensed is because, as I said, it's depreciated. Much like a business. You don't expense a capital asset, you depreciate it over a number of years.
And I appreciate the explanation. A lot of people, when they see a goose egg, they want an explanation. That's all.
Okay? Next, I'd like to briefly go
Excuse me, Jim.
over. Oh, I'm sorry.
Betty?
I kind of want to walk back just a little bit when we were going through the line items here. And I'm looking at line item 111, the motor fuel tax. That revenue for 2014 was $5,379,000, and the budget for 2015 is $3,710,000. That's quite a bit of a reduction there of over 1,600,000. So can you kind of tell me a little bit what's happening?
The 3.7 million is, comes to us through the state of Illinois. In the current year, we had other grants to fund fixing the roads. So that money came in. If we have more come in for the next year to fund a certain road, then the revenue would go up in that fund also. We'd have to come to council and get a budget amendment should we take on a project which is eligible for either a local, federal, or state grant.
Okay,
Well, I'm sorry.
go ahead.
I was just going to say, just to kind of follow up on Councilwoman Gavin's question, which is a very good question. The motor fuel tax fund, I assume that's not grant dollars. Those are tax dollars, correct? Coming from,
What you pay per gallon of gas.
yeah, absolutely, okay.
Right.
So you had said that you had gotten more grants in the past, and that's why it's less now, because you can't really estimate how many grants you're going to get. This is basically, these are motor fuel tax dollars that are due us. I mean, do you see any indication that number's going to go down? I mean, I don't know that I've seen any.
It's been
economic-
slowly creeping up
Right.
as the economy has turned a little bit.
I would have expected to see an increase actually in that number.
In that as well.
Your Honor, I think at the current,
Wait a minute.
I'm through your.
Darren? Okay. Mike.
the current budget, I think, for the motor fuel tax is 3.6 million, and I think we're taking it to 3.7 million, but we're ending the year with 5.3 million, and that's because of that
Additional grants.
additional grants in that fund,
No grants.
which you'll put in that fund also if we
Right,
get any.
if we get any.
Okay.
This is just the 3.7 is what we're expecting next year for just the motor fuel tax.
Okay, so, I'm sorry, got sidetracked. So you're saying the 4.6 million or 7 million in 2013 was not just motor fuel tax? That included grant dollars as well?
Yes,
Oh, okay. I didn't hear that.
there was additional grants.
Revenues
that
other
come
than
in.
motor fuel tax?
Right.
Very good.
Now, the good news, bad news, for years, as gasoline has been priced high, local governments have said the tax should be a percentage of sales. But now, as the price of gas goes down,
Yep.
and it's a flat so many cents per gallon, actually, we don't lose any money. And you see that slight increase. And if people buy more gas, we'll get more money.
Right.
And one other question.
One other, just to tag onto that because I'm going down, still on that page. I'm looking at the, and that is the property improvement fund and general improvement fund. And I'm seeing that the revenues are increasing over $1 million there. So can you kind of tell me where that money is coming from?
The General Capital Improvement Fund is funded solely from a transfer from the general fund.
Okay.
The Property Improvement Fund, that fund is used to capture dollars that when a business or a contractor should come in, put money into an escrow account to make sure that they finish their construction project. So it's really depends on how many projects we have. And then if they don't fulfill their obligations, we use that fund to finish the project. So a million is just a guess. It all depends on how many projects private industry or will come in to build within our city. So it could be much more or much less depending on development. But most of that money that comes into that fund is given back to the developer slash construction companies that would do the work for us. But if they didn't finish it, we do have funds in there to reimburse those. So basically, all that is to take the money in and hold it to make sure that they fulfill their contract obligations.
And I apologize to my colleagues. This is my first budget.
No apology
And
needed.
so, please
Good
be
question.
patient with me because I'm going through this thing line by line. And I do have some more questions, but I'm going to ask one more and then I'm going to release to my colleagues. I'm sorry. I'm still on page 7 here of the budget. And the 2014 revenue budget was about 254 million, a little bit over, almost 300 million. And at the end, it is estimated to be right about 235 million, 275,000. And so that's a deficit of about 19 million. I just kind of want to know what's happening there. Anybody?
The majority of that happened in the grants and special accounts fund. And we budgeted $33 million last year. And we're expecting by the end of this year to use 12 million of that. The grant fund is really self-balancing, so we spend all the money that we get through the grants, and we just didn't spend the 33 million like we expected. So we probably will be spending that in future years.
Okay, because I'm
A lot of
seeing,
that has to do with the multimodal. We budgeted the total multimodal last year. It appears we'll need $12 million in cash this year and 10 million next year.
okay, so that is bringing me to the second part of that question. Is it, because in the new budget, it's showing an additional revenue reductions of about 7.7 million, which brings us to about a $27 million reduction in revenue. So is that where we're going to be trying to work out of, or is that, am I reading this correctly? Or?
Yes, you are. We don't, the multimodal, that's an estimate of how much grant money we're going to be getting in, and then how much we're going to be spending on the project. So we're estimating 10 million over this next year will be what we're going to get in grants and what we're going to spend.
Okay. Thank you. Jim, I got some more questions, but I'm going to give them to you, and if you and staff could get back to me and answer that. I've got and I'll give it to Krista. Thank you. But I got a few more. Looks like a book. So if you would have staff to look at that for me and get back to me. Thank you. I'm sorry, colleague.
Councilman, I have a quick question or clarification. First, I wanted to tell my colleague, Councilwoman Gavin, no apology necessary. Some of us have more or less experience with budgets, be it a business budget. John has, Councilman Girl has a lot of experience, and I think John can tell you better than me. A municipal budget is its own unique animal in some ways versus a standard budget. Your questions bring clarity, transparency, and information to the public, so please don't apologize.
That's my job. My responsibility is to the public. So.
And I'll sit here all night and get those and wait for those answers for you.
Thank you.
Okay. Real quick, just to clarify, Jim, KG, just give me a little clarification on how we came to the 3 million, the negative 3 million number, if you will, in the unassigned fund balance for Evergreen Terrace. Is that accumulation?
Yes,
or is
it
that a
is.
single year?
Yes, in 2012, the Evergreen Terrace amount was spent out of the general fund. You'll see that in the legal budget. And in 2013, a separate fund was created, so all the expenditures were captured in that fund. We expect to be about $3 million to the negative by the end of next year, all depending on how the expenditures, we have 700,000 budgeted to spend on, and really that's all outside attorney fees.
So what you're talking about is a total fund balance, if you will, on the unassigned fund. So, certainly when you take last year's number and you add our 700,000 in requested money, that's where we come up with our 3 million, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. I just wanted that clarified.
Yeah.
JG, so you're anticipating for 2015, 700,000 in legal bills?
Yes.
How do we come with that number?
A lot of that has to do whether they appeal the prior decision on whether it can be condemned. I think we're pretty close to the time where they'd run out of time to even appeal that. And then the next phase will be the valuation phase. So the estimates were about 300,000 if there was an appeal, and 400,000 on the valuation phase. Of course, if we could settle on a valuation through negotiations, then we won't have to spend that much. And legal's not here, but I'm pretty sure we're getting pretty close to the time where they can even appeal the first decision.
Can we look maybe in 6 months, in June, if we look that we do not need to dip in that total dollar amount? I'd like to see if we could transfer some of that money back into the neighborhood improvement fund. If we could do something like 100,000 in each of the 5 districts. That way we're spreading some improvements citywide. Just something we can look back in maybe in June if we're not going to spend the entire $700,000.
We'll keep council up to date on, as Evergreen Terrace proceeds, the dates, the deadline for appeal, whether an appeal was made or not, the starting date for the valuation phase, anticipated conclusion date, and so forth. So you've got a handle on all of that.
If I were a betting man, I'd bet they can't find an attorney to appeal it. They didn't pay their last attorney. So,
That's correct.
yeah, I kind of doubt they're going to be able to find an attorney to represent them in the appeal process. But anyway, that being said, okay. Mike, I'm sorry, did we get to you?
Yeah.
Okay.
The next slide just takes a picture of the general fund. We have 163 million in revenues. That's pretty much flat. We budgeted almost exactly what we budgeted last year. Expenditures at 172 million, and we are looking to use the fund balance of almost 8.7 million. Our water fund is about as close to being balanced. We have 41.8 million in revenues, expenditures about 41.5, and that will increase our net position about $300,000. And our parking fund, we are looking at about 1.32 million. That's what we budgeted exactly last year or the current year, and expenditures of 1.68 million, and we're looking to use fund balance of about 356,000 in the parking fund. That will leave the parking fund with about $800,000 in cash still. We will have to revisit the parking fund once the parking study is finished, and we can look at it in a more global area. So at this point, we are recommending just status quo and waiting for that study to come. So again, we may have to amend that budget during the fiscal year, depending on council's desire.
A lot of that has to do with the final presentation of the downtown development plan, talking to the county about their desire to take over the Ottawa Street Garage, and implementing, trying to get all the players at the table and talk about the recommendations in the parking plan and how that can be integrated with what is presented in the downtown development plan and so forth.
Mayor?
Yes.
As in regards to the parking plan, and again, I don't know if I'm breaking any kind of a protocol here, but I figure before I forget,
Sure.
it's certainly not in the budget. It's not something that's been brought up. I wish I could take credit for it, but I have to say it's one of my own constituents that brought this to my attention, that if we're going to, in the big picture, encourage development downtown, one of the things is keeping and attracting businesses, and one of the killers is the high cost of daily parking every month. So if we can look at, I'm not looking for, I'd love the parking fund to be completely solvent, balanced, even make some extra money to use somewhere else, but even if you lose some money, that's the cost of development. I would like to see a program explored where, businesses that are there and come down there get a reduced, if not free, a reduced parking to make it more affordable, so they don't decide. I had one person tell me they moved out because their employees and themselves, everybody involved, cost roughly $1,300 a month. So they went to a more suburban place, bought a business, and the $1,300 almost covered their nut on the mortgage. So that's something we may have to look at, which might further deplete the projections. But if you can make notes of that, Jim, JH, If you can make notes of that, I would like to explore that. I know it was one of my own constituents that brought it to my attention.
Larry, I kind of agree with you. You know, we talked about doing away with the parking meters, et cetera. The only concern is policing them. How do we, people that are working down there, how do we police them? I know in the olden days, you used to ride by with the motorcycle and mark the tire with a piece of chalk, but how do we police them so that those people that get there early in the morning don't park and stay there all day? That's one of my concerns.
That's a great question. So I think that's, JH, somebody's got to solve that. That's a great question from the mayor. Somebody's got to solve that, and answer that question.
Maybe I can. As a downtown business owner, I buy parking, but I buy it in the parking deck, not on the street. So if you're going to reduce the rate or make it free or whatever it's being considered, it would be in the parking deck, so it wouldn't be taking up street spots.
Okay, all right.
Your Honor.
That's a good.
Mike, yeah.
Jim, we're going to use almost around $9 million in the reserve funds to balance the budget. What's that going to leave us in reserve then?
That will leave us with almost 21% of expenditures. Our rule of thumb is 2 months, which is 16.7%.
So we're still in good shape.
So we still should have adequate reserves at the end of 2015.
Okay, very good. Nelson? Okay, Jim? JG?
This just generally explains the three funds and what they do. Generally, the general fund takes care of every service that's not in other funds. It's no secret that our police and fire protection is our highest expenditures. We also do planning and economic development, engineering, code enforcement. Garbage collection is charged to the finance department budget. Legal services, financial services, and general administration. In our water and sewer fund, we have 3 wastewater treatment plants, 450 miles of sanitary sewer, 26 wells, 11 water treatment plants, and 38 lift stations. Quite an elaborate infrastructure. The parking fund supports 2 parking decks, 7 parking lots, 700 or so on-street meters, and our parking at the Joliet Union Station.
That being said, the water and sewer fund, I remember a while back we were discussing whether to go to the Kankakee River for water supply or buy it out of Lake Michigan. Reading in the paper what's happening in some of these other cities that opted to buy Lake Michigan water and how the rates are going up, I think the right decision was made to dig these wells and supply our own water. So.
The last, I think it was right after Mayor Emanuel got elected, he announced 15% annual water rate increases to all the suburban subscribers for the next 5 years. 15% a year for 5 years.
Mayor?
Yeah.
In public service, we discussed with the budget about projections of making sure we are maintaining a neutral, if not positive, water and sewer fund. Have we had staff put any reports together on this? I know there was anticipation with all the underground digging and work that there was possibly a time frame where we would have to look at increasing some of the fees. And I think the concern that I brought up was we didn't want to do a knee-jerk 45% rate increase like this council had to do previously.
No, that's a very good point, Councilman McFarland. It's oftentimes much easier to look at a 2% annual increase and stay ahead of your plan, your capital improvement plan that you know is coming, and prepare for that, as opposed to say, okay, now we've got to issue this big bond, and now we've got a bond debt, and that's going to require a huge increase. So that is something I think this next year we'll be taking a look at as a study for that.
Thank you.
This just shows in a chart the items we just went over. The general fund, we are looking at a 2.4% increase. In the water fund, because of some Expenditures, about a 15% increase, and the parking fund, about a 14.8% increase. But overall, that's about a 4.8% increase for our three operating funds. It's, I'd like to take some time now to look at the general fund. As I said earlier, we are looking at keeping our revenues the same, no increases in any taxes or fees. Some of the things that have been added is a 8-page quarterly newsletter, a tree trimming and a tree replacement program, an emergency notification system, a fleet maintenance software program, and repair to the fountain in Bicentennial Park. One of the things that's folded into this budget is increases in our pension contributions. This comes out of the actuarial study prepared by Gabriel Roeder Smith and Company. There was a $629,000 increase for the police pension and a $198,000 increase for the fire pension. Included with the positions that we recommended adding tonight, we are allocating money for a new police training sergeant and 4 maintenance workers dedicated to tree trimming and 2 part-time drivers.
Chief, Jim, is that 2 police training sergeant or one training
It's
sergeant?
1 training sergeant and 1
NOPT.
NOPT sergeant.
Very good, thank you.
And the 2 drivers are shuttling vehicles. Our waste management fees, we have a contract through 2016, and there's a 3.5% increase. Of course, there's 2 parts to our waste management charge. That's the amount of tonnage that we collect and the fee. We kept the amount of tonnage at a flat amount. Of course, if that goes up or down, then our fee will go up or down based on the tonnage. It's been pretty flat over the last 3 years.
Does the tonnage include recycle? Because we are doing a lot more recycling now. So is the tonnage both recycle and garbage, or just the garbage? You know what I'm saying? Because
The pickup portion is both.
both. Okay.
The tipping is just the garbage,
Okay.
the tipping fees.
All right, thank you.
That's the amount we pay to dump into the dump.
Do we collect anything on what's recycled, or does Waste Management keep it? Whatever's
Waste Management
recycled, the
keeps
glass, the plastic, gets sold to private vendors. Do we get any money? We're the ones doing the work, our citizens, by separating that. Are we collecting any money for
No,
that?
we don't get nothing for that. We do get, like I said, a reduction in the tipping fees, which is quite a bit.
And the tipping fees being what Waste Management has to pay to dump?
Yeah, to dump right into the,
When a truck goes into the junkyard, they weigh the truck. And so that recycled waste is not part of that stream, that they have to pay a tipping fee, and so it reduces how many trips they make to the dump. If I could speak to a couple of these issues here and how they tie back to our strategic plan. One of the goals of the council is to improve communications with the residents. That included written and social media and getting them more involved in the community. So what I have is $38,000 proposed for a 8-page city newsletter delivered 4 times a year in a plastic bag right on every porch. Where we have multifamily, what they do is set up a little kiosk, newspaper kiosk in the lobby of or a central location so that people can pick it up and communicate to them that it's there.
So will this be sent, or is this physically delivered
It's physically delivered by a private company.
to
'Cause
every
it's
household
cheaper.
in Joliet?
Yes,
All right.
it's cheaper than the mail.
And it's 43,000, you're saying?
38,000 for 4 issues. Now you can,
What are we gonna do for our residents that are that predominantly Hispanic that don't speak English? I know we do used to do a newsletter until budget cuts out of neighborhood services, because that was a need and something that was communicated through some of our neighborhood groups. Are we looking at something like that?
That's something we can certainly talk about. You know, if you, once this is published and delivered, you can also have it available online on our website, and you can have it interpreted right online and through a connection with Google, and it'll convert to any language you want, about 80 different languages.
So I, just to talk on this one issue, is I made it vocal at the last meeting. One of my, I'm not in favor of this in this year's budget. Two reasons why. One is social media. I know there's a city Facebook page. We spent millions on updating our technology here at the city through Granicus, where we could do electronic e-blasting. We have capabilities of getting messages out through our water bills. I know we're doing the new emergency notification system. I'd like to see that money, at least in this year's budget. You're talking about part-time individuals. In the summer months, hiring college kids from whether it's any of the area schools, Joliet residents, to start cleaning up our arteries and our entry points into the city, whether it's state property, our property, the downtown area. There's no money in this budget to replace the individual that retired for the downtown area. It still looks, to me, like a mess. And we're talking about inviting people. We're trying to do any and everything we can to make sure that we maintain the courthouse downtown. I think we should take this little amount of money and hire some college kids in the summer months and start cleaning up our arteries. The garbage, the trash. They can also help with the tree inventory if that's possible. But I think right now, just doing an Operation Curb Appeal. I don't see any dollars in the budget for that. And I think right now that this money could use an initiative like that, or putting it into our curb replacement. I see there's a slight increase in it. There's $60,000, but this council voted to settle a lot of legal claims this year with individuals getting injured on city sidewalks. And I don't see an increase in funding in that area enough. And I think that's another priority we should look at before we look into sending out notifications by individuals going door to door. That's my impression on it, and I don't support this 8-page quarterly newsletter at this time.
I understand what you're saying, but there are a lot of seniors out there that are not on social media. And I think this would be a great addition to them. And as far as cleaning up the entrances to the city and downtown, I think we need to start looking to schools, colleges, to these students that have to do so many hours of work, community service work, and maybe start using that to help us clean up the
Both of you attended the recent breakfast meeting of the Joliet Job Corps.
Right.
And I've already had casual conversation, and we'll have more formal conversation about how to utilize some of their students for the exact purposes that Councilman McFarland was raising. Maintaining the downtown. We last year initiated the tree inventory program, and also we did Public Works crack sealing program with 4 college kids, and so we're hoping that we can utilize some of those Job Corps people that have already received training in these areas and can get some experience in a career path.
And if I remember correctly, quote, they pay the salary and we put them to work.
That's right.
Yes. So, Larry.
Yeah, quick question. First of all, I didn't attend that meeting, and I usually don't skip a free breakfast, but so I just was too busy. You know, myself and Councilman McFarland had talked about this, and he makes some good points on that. You know, every penny counts, but what the concern that the mayor just expressed is something you and I discussed about the older folks. So I'm thinking this is something we need to do for as little money as possible. What I mean is we don't need to rush into it. If we're going to do it, we have to find a way to address those that aren't connected to the internet. Let's make a June 1st target date. If we do anything, electronic or hard paper, let's take this slow and make a June 1st target date on putting out a newsletter. We might be able to shift some of the funds, like you said, like you say, for a college program. And then maybe we can talk to our friends in the media, whether it's the Times Weekly, the Herald News, the ones that deliver around here, and see what kind of community partnership we can get as of June 1st to get. What I had told the councilman is, I think that the electronic thing is fantastic. It's a great idea. but how do we let people know ahead of time that it's available if they're not receiving? Well, I think that we need to take this slower then, because it is still money being spent, and we can reach out to the media companies and maybe work out a way to get everybody online electronically first, which would lower the cost, and then address those that aren't at a lower budget. But I think a June 1st target date would be the best way to do it. That way we have a way to explore the ideas, both that Councilman McFarland has brought up, and then the questions that the mayor brought up and myself brought up. I think that's a rational way to approach it.
The $38,000 that I'm suggesting was just an estimate from one source that I received, and of course, we'd take a look at bids for this type of thing and go into further detail once we have something in the budget.
Mayor, I have one.
I just want to suggest, I'm glad you took my suggestion about community service with the college students and high school kids, but also, as I stated before, you know, we all own homes or apartments or whatever, and we maintain our houses, and we pick up our garbage, and we make sure that our area is neat. And I just think, you know, if you own a business, you want your outside to look nice and neat, and it shouldn't always be depending on the city to clean up your area. Because I know there's a lot of businesses, not only on the east side and downtown, but also on the west side out by the mall. I suggested before, there's garbage all over the place. What would it take to just do a little maintenance on your own, take a little responsibility as a business owner to get people in your business instead of waiting for someone to come and clean up your garbage, not your garbage, but stuff that people have left there. I mean, that would help everybody out.
I'm absolutely amazed when I ride around and I see all the junk out in the parkways.
Exactly.
The people just pitch it out the window, yeah.
Yeah, it's really
Just-
bad.
Chief Foremost, you know, we just discussed earlier about Station 9 and till we deplete the overtime. Say we look at June to implement this program. If we were to allocate the $38,000 back into the overtime budget in the fire department, how many days of service would that give Ambulance 9? Any idea? 20 days? And again, I guess my point of bringing this up is about getting back to our core basic services. The newsletter is a great idea. I'm in communications, I think it's great, but I think, again, prioritizing our dollars and cents is key one. We started this meeting out talking about potentially funding for all of 2015 Ambulance 9. There's no guarantee there. So again, I'm just asking, make sure if this is the right decision to spend $38,000 on an 8-page quarterly newsletter, we're making sure Ambulance 9's in service.
You know, I understand what you're saying, but, you know, we all talk about transparency and so forth, and I think this newsletter goes a long way in doing that, to let people out there know what's going on in the city. So I don't know, it's a decision that this council's gonna have to make. I'm sorry, wait a minute, Mike.
You know, I agree that the more information we get to our residents, the better. But we need to find another revenue stream as well to take care of some of these projects. And I just want to try to take a look at where our interest income comes from. Is there a way that, I'm looking at that, are we investing our money wisely where we can get a better return on our dollars? I'm looking at $50,000 projected here for 2015. And so how can we, or what are we doing to, you know, get more bang for our buck instead of just letting it set someplace? How is that working? So we need
Well,
we
I'm sure
definitely need
Mr.
another
Gadati
revenue
can
stream.
answer that, but briefly I'll say, you know, under state law, we're limited as to the types of investments we can have as a municipality. We have to be in the safest type of investment to make sure that the taxpayers don't lose the principal amount of the investments that we make. The other thing is that we have to time those investments because we spend that money throughout the year. We've got to time our revenues, we've got to time our investments because we're timing our expenditures. And so you've got some long-term investments, you've got some short-term and some mid-term, and they've all got to be coordinated.
So if we are,
So you're not going to make as much money typically
well, you know,
because
I
we're not
just
really
believe in
taking the
doing,
risks.
You know, best practices of who's doing a better job at it and what are they doing to make sure that they're getting monies back. I don't know whether we should maybe look at our partners, maybe the county or other cities and find out what they're doing to ensure, sort of, see if we can get a better bang for our buck, and maybe that additional monies, if there are any, then we can attach to some of these revenue eaters that we're getting.
Councilman?
I think that, I like the idea of the newsletter. I consider myself somewhat into social media, but not near to the degree that some other people are. But, I think that, like the township I live in, we get a quarterly newsletter. I don't go on the township's website to see what's going on there, but I always read that newsletter and find out what's happening. So I think a lot of people would like it. I think it does create transparency. I think a lot of useful information can be put in there. $38,000 is a lot of money, but I think when you're looking at a $279 million budget, I think it could be absorbed in there pretty easily. I also think that first impressions mean a lot, and when someone gets off one of our expressways and sees the garbage laying around, it's horrible. They shouldn't have to do with that. So if we have to come up with a little bit extra money this summer to hire some students or whoever to do that, in addition to free help or through service hours or volunteerism, I think we need to do that. And if that's 40,000 or something, our reserves are still going to be healthy. I think we're still way over the two months, and I don't think we should be getting crazy with it. I have no intention of doing that, but I think these two items could be accomplished, what we're all talking about, with a minimal effect on the bottom line of the budget. That's my opinion.
Yes, excuse me, Councilman.
Yeah, Mike, I think, excuse me, as a group, I think we're talking out of both sides of our mouth tonight. And Mayor, Mike, you talk about first impressions. What do you think the impression is of our city when there's a triple shooting and WGN News is here covering the story? When people see that on TV who aren't from Joliet, they're not going to decide or decipher whether it happened in a good part of town or a bad part of town or what ethnicity was involved. They think it's Joliet. It hurts all of us. It hurts our home values, it hurts our businesses, and it hurts our chances of recruiting new people, young people, to raise a family, to come to Joliet to raise a family or to stay in Joliet or to bring new business in. So, Mayor, if I could tie that back, and maybe I'm a little confused. I read in the Herald News yesterday, there was an issue about not hiring any new police officers, one new sergeant. And your comment was that we didn't have the money to hire new police officers, correct?
I says we'll have to find the money or a new source of revenue, yes.
All right, so
Yes.
now we found the money in 24 hours. Now we're hiring 5. What are we shorting that was in the books yesterday that we're taking out today to hire those 5 officers?
I think Jim addressed that, the overtime for the fire department.
Yes,
Okay.
the overtime from the fire department.
What else could be done? My understanding was Chief Benton is requesting 11 new police officers, not 3. Chief Benton would know what it takes to run neighborhood policing because I believe you were one of the original officers. Is that correct?
Not one of the original 4, but shortly thereafter, yes. Back in 1990, when the program was expanded.
And I could tell you from my experiences, I worked on the Hill for most of my 10 years. I wasn't patrol, but back in those days, and it was a tough neighborhood, you would know, Mayor, you were on the fire department, Betty, you would know. There were not just the 2 patrol officers that worked in the neighborhood, there were 2 NOPT officers in the first set of housing projects, and there were 2 additional officers in the second set of housing projects. So for at least 8 hours a day, you would have a minimum of 6 policemen in that neighborhood. It worked. I think, Betty.
I can certainly attest to the impact that the NOPT officers have in the areas. I think that we need more, and we need to work that way of getting us back to the level. Chief, I'm not sure, is it 40 that we're down, but now overall. But I think that the NOPT officers are crucial to the areas. I also love the fact about the car program. Because we don't have those officers in the neighborhoods now, even the car program is a bit of a deterrent, but we definitely need to get the NOPT officers back into our neighborhoods. And we've got to work on that. We've got to really find the money to get that done. And in the meantime, we have to let our residents know that they have to be accountable as well. We have to stop this madness of shooting and these instances that I don't want to go off on that soapbox, but anyway.
Well, there's been 4 homicides in this city since Thanksgiving.
Absolutely, it's
unacceptable.
Crazy.
And Chief, I think, again, and I'm drawing on your experience because I know you were one of the originals, maybe not the original, but there's a formula that we put in play back in the 90s and it worked. And I would love to see our city move towards that. If you're asking for 11, I'd like to see us get to 11 or as close as possible. 3 is not close. It's an improvement over none, Jim, but it's not 11.
I think everybody here agrees with you, but that old, you got to walk before you can run. There's no question about it. We're not going to replace them all overnight, and I think you, being a police officer, would know this. You could have a police officer on every corner. You're not going to deter all the crime.
It's not deterring all crime, but
Well, wait a minute. I didn't interrupt you.
well,
Please.
look at the criminal
Okay,
statistics. They've gone down, and now they're going back up.
I saw a report that was done for the city of Joliet, and out of the 9 or 10 subject areas, Joliet went down in nine. 2 of them they went up in. There was 11 of them. The other 9 they went down in. Okay, so they are doing a great job. Should we get back to full NOPT? No question about it. But I think this is a good start. 2016 budget, maybe we need to look at adding some more.
If I may, the chief requested these 3 NOPT positions, the sergeant over the entire unit. He had a request for 5 other officers, but the justification was aimed at the Union Station. Now, I'm not recommending that because however, in a couple years from now, I will be recommending it because when the multimodal project is complete, we've got a substation down there with monitoring equipment, and it will have to be manned by police officers. So I don't think we're ready for those additional officers for that purpose. But I am recommending what the chief requested in the NOPT program.
Bob, my comments were addressed at the aesthetics of which we were talking about coming into the city, and we're talking about a $38,000 newsletter. Nothing to do with NOPT. I think NOP has proved its worthiness, and it's always been successful, and I agree we need to get it more beefed up within budget limits. But I was totally addressing the aesthetic portion of the city, and we're talking about a $38,000 and a $279 million budget, and we're just talking about it for 15 minutes now. So, I think we can accommodate both of those things this
And
year.
if Mayor and Council would allow us to get through the complete presentation so that we can, because you're bringing up some issues that I think we'll be able to address here further. Going back to the quarterly newsletter, one of our strategic plan initiatives was to implement a multi-platform city resident communication program. So there is more to that communication program, but I'm suggesting that a newsletter be part of that program. The other thing that is a tremendous expenditure and a multi-year program that's in this proposed budget is the 4 additional positions in Public Works for the tree trimming. Now, if you go to the capital budget on page 95, you'll see that to really have a forestry division, I'm proposing a $130,000 expenditure on a bucket truck. It's in the left-hand column at the bottom of page 95. There's a chipper at $70,000. Let me see here. Was there anything else? That's it. So you've got not just employee cost, you've got capital equipment cost to start up the operations. But the other big part of this is to address the emerald ash borer. I'm proposing $250,000 for cutting down trees and $250,000 this year but also make that a multi-year, a 5 to 6 year plan where we have $250,000 towards entering into an agreement with a nursery to start growing the stock here locally, so that we are assured that we are going to have these trees every year to be able to plant them. Because what we're finding is that this has devastated the area, and it's hard to find the stock, and we're paying $50 to $75 more per tree than if we had our own nursery stock and entered into a multi-year program here. So that's really what's involved in this tree trimming and replacement program.
Quick question, Mayor.
So that freezes the price of the trees to us for the next 5 years.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, and it gives us a guarantee of so many trees, and the important thing is a wide variety of trees, because that's what's created this problem is ash trees grew fast and large, and it was a tree of choice, and we see what happens when you overutilize any one species of tree, that it can cause devastation to an entire urban forest. So the emergency notification system that's proposed.
Wait a minute.
I'm sorry?
Councilman Hug. had a
About the
question.
tree, I mean, that's one of the first issues you and I discussed when you came on board. 'Cause certainly it's huge out west. I've been pushing this for a while. So am I hearing this right? Do we finally have a final signed grow contract?
No, that's something, once you authorize this expenditure in this year, we will be able to go out to bid January, February for a multi-year growing program with a nursery. We did look at the program that I thought was available through the state, where you could borrow up to $2 million interest-free, but that legislation never did pass, never got off the ground. So if it does happen, we can still avail ourselves of that, but I think it's still important to have an independent contract that'll get us much better rates, and because we know we need to replace all these trees. The emergency notification system is a voluntary sign-up program, and that will allow us to send a message to any resident via text, email, voice message, home phone, cell phone, whatever they sign up for, and we can send out messages of a impending tornado in a certain area. You can say, next week on this block, your hydrants will be flushed, so look out for rusty water in your faucet, kind of message. And it's a very good tool. Any kind of snow emergency, we can say, as of 6 p.m. there's a snow emergency, and whoever signs up, then we've captured email addresses and other information that we can use for that communication program, for a newsletter or e-blasts or any other information that they're going to agree that they'd like to receive. The fleet maintenance software module is something that, again, ties back to our strategic plan, so that we can get all of the information about all of our vehicles and know when to schedule maintenance on everything. Also, I've got a proposal for $150,000 for the bicentennial fountain. And here, in this case, what I'm proposing goes back to the issue. You say, wait a minute, that's a lot of money. Well, this fountain hasn't been working since 2006, and in 2000 we got an estimate of $150,000 just to repair it. So that's why nothing's been done. This is a memorial fountain. Met with the family members. They'd like to see it a fountain, and what I envision is maybe having a committee of family, some of the residents around By Park, a couple of board members of By Park, forming a committee and getting some proposals on what they'd like to see there. From a selfish administrative standpoint, I don't want to see a pool of water. I'd like to see a zero depth type of fountain, but not a splash pad that you see in the parks, but something very ornamental. But with the zero depth, you don't have to worry about the chlorination the filtering, the UV sanitization is much more simpler and automated now. And it also gets back to the issue, you talk about presenting your town, and why do people want to live in Joliet, and what is it that people say they like about Joliet? It's the events, it's the activities, it's the attractions that make us different from the next town that people want to be here. So it may not cost $150,000, it may be $250,000, but I thought that would be a good start to have this committee formed and have a budget that they could get some proposals and see what comes of it.
Well, I certainly do think that the Bicentennial Park, that the improvements there are long overdue. So I welcome the fact that we will put together a committee with the residents, the families, and the committee, because it is a very beautiful park, and it just needs to be a little facelift done and get back to. Thank you for that. I know I have a couple of our residents that are here would love to be on that committee.
Jim or Jim?
The general fund also continues to fund the new computer system. We are going live January 1st on the financial end and some of the modules, and we'll be implementing the other modules throughout the year. I think the utility module for the water and sewer billing is 6 months away. We have $250,000 to have a fiber optic connection between the Union Station and the police department. There's, as you know, the ceiling in Silver Cross Field needs to be repaired. We took bids on that, and did we actually take bids?
Yeah.
They came up quite high because of the timing. We have since discovered that additional ceiling is going to be made, so we hope to get it all done in next year, 2015. We also are required by our contract to replace the board. The scoreboard is estimated to be about $300,000. That cost is supposed to be shared by the slammers, and half of that would be $150,000. I've been told that that scoreboard is at the end of its life, that the operating system is no longer viable, and they will not be able to find someone to fix it. Yeah, we'll have to, of course, go through the bidding process.
One question, on page 13 of the budget, I noticed that there's a zero revenue from the baseball naming rights. Is that the other half of the 300,000? Are they just not giving us payment this year? So page 13, baseball park naming rights. Looks like in 12 we received 160, then in 2013 it was 80,000. This
Yeah.
year it was projected 150 and it's zero, and then we're budgeting another 150.
Well, it's zero so far. We just got the estimates of their attendance, so that will be worked out in the next week.
Gotcha.
We have not received the money yet. Of course, some of that is rebated, and it's all scaled depending on the attendance. And I guess the estimate was around 70,000, which puts it pretty low historically.
In terms of attendance this year.
Right.
Since we're on
AJ?
page 13,
Excuse me.
oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay. No,
We just don't.
okay. All right, my question. But I just, since we were on page 13, which brought to me something about another zero, the cellular tower rental was at like 20,000 and to zero. Could you explain what's happening there? It says, I think that's line
2500.
yeah,
Or 2600, I'm sorry.
2500. Yeah. where it says 2014 estimated at the end was $20,000, and then for 20.
Councilwoman, I'll have to get back with you on that and look at the contract. We haven't received anything yet, but I'm sure that, as you can see, we budgeted what we budgeted last year, but we've already received 16,000, so I'll have to read the contract and see when those are supposed to be paid.
All right, thank you, sir.
Mayor?
Yes.
Excuse me. Just a quick question. I think we've answered it, but I could be incorrect. The $250,000 we're going to allocate for a fiber optic connection between Union Station and the Police Department certainly is the jumping off point to a wider fiber optic that eventually might go citywide. But that's necessary because of the multimodal. Is there a reason why it's not coming out of the multimodal budget?
It could be budgeted either in the capital project or the general fund. It all comes out of the general fund, so we budgeted in the capital project fund. The multimodal project, the federal part, or the state part is paid for by them, but this would be our expense.
So what you're saying is the state wouldn't pay for this?
Correct.
The security system that's going to be in Union Station was part of the grant,
But not the fiber optic?
but not the connections, yeah,
So we tried and they said no.
right.
Okay, good enough.
Jim?
There's 2 items for a study. $40,000 is there for organization study, and $150,000 is for the first phase of a study on the city infrastructure. What this is we are going to be looking at all of our buildings, and we'll be taking a quote. We expect that if we did all of our buildings, it would be quite a bit more than $150,000, but we don't know at this time, so we'd like to get a quote and start having a professional come in and look at our buildings and give us a plan on how to keep them up today's standards. As you know, we have roofs that are leaking. We had a recent incident where at Union Station, we put in our IT, and then the roof started leaking. So we would like to start hiring a professional to go through all of our buildings and to give us a plan on when we should be replacing certain items. These are large capital items, and we feel that, you know, just like your house, it's much better to replace a roof before it starts leaking. But right now, we don't know, so we'd like to hire a firm, get some quotes, and see how many buildings we can get done, and then put together a multi-year plan.
This is one of the strategic infrastructure maintenance categories of our strategic plan.
Question. $150,000. Could we hire somebody and have them?
That's what this is for, is to hire a structural engineering firm to come in.
No, I'm
and-
talking about hire somebody in our inspection division or somebody like that and have them do this.
No, because you really need to go to a firm, because they're going to have one engineer that focuses on nothing but HVAC, and another engineer that focuses on nothing but roof structures, and then another, so they've got specialists in each of the areas that they're going to be focusing on for each structure.
All right. Very good. Thank you.
Quick question. Mayor.
Sure.
So, my question would be then, so essentially what we're doing here, to kind of make a comparison, is we need to get together an inventory, kind of like our tree inventory that we're starting to do. There's something that we've not gotten on the books yet, and we
True.
really need to formalize it. And that way we know what we're looking at, and that we can repair the roof next year, the HVAC the year after, and we can schedule it out. Am I
We
correct?
should have a 10-year plan on maintenance of major issues and replacement, so that we don't face a leaking roof in the Union Station when you're just
I don't
about to
thi-
put expensive equipment in there.
Jim, I don't think I could agree with you on this any more than, even if you were my wife, I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah.
Just last thing on the operating budget, if you could just go back to the waste management increase, the 448,000. Exactly what is causing this type of increase? Is there,
Council approved a extension of the contract for, was it 2 years, with 3.5% increase in each year. So it's a known increase.
So, so to, instead of raising the rates on the residents, we're dipping in reserves to accommodate this increase?
This year, yes.
So potentially an increase
You're
will be
going to see a
proposed to us?
3.5% increase next year.
All right. Is there an opener in the contract,
No, that was,
waste management? For instance, the city of Joliet's one of the only municipalities in the county that allows our residents to put out tires at their end of their driveway. I think items like that, I think we need to talk about maybe getting rid of. Bringing in, again, recycling we talked about, I know in committee about the electronics recycling. So we're bound for, you know, how many more years on this waste management contract?
yes, it'd be a 2-year period.
2 more years.
Yeah.
So the residents can project for another 2 years, a 3.5% increase.
15 and 16, yes. Oh, 17 as well.
Jim, done?
Yeah, well, hang on, just to
It
clarify.
was 2017 as well,
So 2016, 15, and 16.
15, 16,
and
17.
17.
That's it. So folks in January will see an increase in their,
Not of 15. We are proposing that this $448,000 be picked up by the general fund,
just want to clarify,
not passing that increase on to the residents.
potentially 16, 17.
We'll have to take a look at that, because otherwise it'll continue to eat into the general fund balance.
Right. We're all about transparency.
Jim, part of that extension of the contract, was that they give us the garbage containers, or was that prior to that?
I don't,
Maybe somebody can help me out.
yeah. I think it was prior to the current
Prior to that?
contract.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Question, Mayor.
Sure.
Now that you mention it, it's up in 2017. I remember that from when we came on in 2011. And typically, I'm assuming it might take a year or more to go through a bidding process of a large, complex contract like that. What are we doing to get ahead of the curve to put it out for bid again?
I'm trying to get 2015 laid out. You're asking me about
Yes, I am.
2017?
We're going beyond 2 weeks to a year, now we're going to 2. But I mean, really, it's something we need to address by the end of 2015 and get set up for 16, don't you think?
No, I'm sure our purchasing director has it on her radar in terms of a timetable to work on these things well in advance of the deadline.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Jim or Jim?
The next graph just shows you where our revenues come from. As you can see, we are spread out pretty evenly, so we have a pretty diverse revenue source. This numerically shows you the separate revenue sources that the previous graph showed you graphically. This is a graph of our expenditures. We are looking at 172.3. Shows you the separate departments. The next graph, as you can see, most of our expenditures go towards people. 79% of our budget, when you take the payroll and the benefits, is we're a service organization, so almost 80% of our budget is used for people. The one thing on here that I could point out is our debt service. We do have very low debt service. 0.2%. We have one outstanding debt issue, and we have just refinanced our radio tower, so there was additional savings there.
Mayor?
Yes.
Obviously, that's going to go off with the wastewater runoff bond that we passed.
The two IEPA loans have not been floated yet. We will be looking at that, and that will affect our water and sewer system. But we have not did those. We have refinanced all of our, or refunded all of our water bonds, and we saved quite a bit of money on those over the time. But yes, we have two large IEPA loans coming up, almost $22 million, and that will affect our water system. We will have to look at that in 2016, because the debt, when we get to the water system, you'll see the debt is, in the water fund itself is getting pretty large. That will affect our ability to fund operations. And this shows the numbers graphically of our expenditures in the general fund. That was ties to this previous graph here. Some additional things that are coming out of our general fund. We are looking to buy 30 vehicles. Not all the vehicles that were requested were recommended by the city manager. As you know, we have changed our pension interest rate assumption. We are now at 6.75%, and that, as you've seen earlier, affected the amount of pension that we have to put into the Illinois Municipal Fund. I will say that we are putting a plan together to have our fund 90% funded by 2040.
That's mandated by the state, right?
It is.
Yes.
Right.
During that presentation, currently, we are about 2% short based on what we're contributing now. So we have asked the actuarial firm to put a plan to get us to 40% or 90% by 2040. But we're awful close with our current funding right now. As you know, in the current year, we put over $700,000 more into the IMRF based on lowering our assumption rate from 7% to 6.875. And our 2015 contribution is based on a 6.75% interest rate earnings.
Mayor, you want-
Yeah, John.
You had said that we had increased our contribution to IMRF based on reducing our investment strategy and assumptions. I don't know if that's correct, because IMRF is non-public safety, and they basically just give you a dollar amount. They send you a bill and say, here's what the number is based on their assumptions. Are you sure you didn't mean the public safety
Yes,
pension?
I
Okay.
misspoke. Yes,
Okay.
I did mean the public safety pension funds.
Thank you.
And those pension funds are passed through, we don't see them. We
Right.
levy it and they go right to the public safety pension, so I did misspeak.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Jim?
We are looking at purchasing a new mail machine for $22,000. We have always passed the federal fire tax, and that's a pass-through, so we have not budgeted before, but I did include that in this budget since we do levy a tax, but the revenue equals the expenditures that goes to the federal, authority there, and the chief meets with them, and they discuss how they expend
That's the
that
foreign
money.
fire tax?
Yes. In the current budget, one thing to note is that last year we took a pretty serious hit on our snow removal. We have not increased the budget to last year's levels. Hopefully it won't snow as much, but we did increase the amount for our contractual snow removal from 120 to 320, and our salt and other chemicals from 600,000 to over $1 million. I've been told that we almost ran out of salt. This will provide 16 tons of salt for us. Typically, we have a reserve, and we use anywhere from 10 to 12 tons, and we would put the rest of the salt in reserve. Should we have another horrible winter, then we may have to come back to council. It was a record-setting winter last year, so hopefully we won't have to expend these funds at all, and it won't snow, but I don't have the authority to make it not snow, so. With that, we'll move on to the water and sewer fund. We are looking at 41.8 million in revenue, and that would be without raising any of the fees. We have recommended budgeting 41.5. That increases the amount that we are looking for expenses about 16%, but we still will add to the reserve. And we are still looking at doing numerous projects. As we discussed earlier, we are looking at 2 large loans in the next year to increase the water system. We're keeping our levels consistent, and we have provided for increase in our maintenance costs. Our system is getting older. There is $238,000 budgeted for the water portion of our new system. And what's included in this budget, and these are loans that we already have, is $6.7 million for revenue bond debt service and $802,000 for EPA loan that we took out in prior years.
Your Honor,
Yes.
I have a question.
Sure.
Jim, you had mentioned, Councilman Odekirk had a question about the debt service in the general fund, and you said that that's probably going to increase because of the IEPA loans.
No, that would be in the water fund.
I was going to say, that those dollars would come out of the water and
Right,
sewer fund,
right.
I would assume.
Yeah, the debt would, general bonded debt would come out of the general fund.
Right.
And like I said, we
These
have
revenue
one-
bonds,
yeah,
I
we have
assume, would
one
come out of
bond.
this fund.
These would be revenue bonds.
Thank you.
correct. The IEP loans is very low percent, so. it's
Extremely.
a better route to go than to go out on the open market with revenue.
It's very
bonds.
cheap money.
This is just graphically showing where our money in the water fund, and as you can see, it all comes from water bills and sewer bills, pretty much 95%. This graphically shows the different areas. If you look in your budget under the water fund, each of these areas are broken down. I would point out that our debt service is almost at $9 million a year. This graphically shows where the money is going.
Mayor?
Yes.
Jim Hock, regarding the water and sewer fund, there's the bullet point about providing for increased maintenance costs of an aging system. Has there been any discussion at your level about a long-term plan? I know we had, last couple of years, we've had a lot of issues with water main breaks. Obviously, the weather was bad last year, it was extreme. But when we started opening fire hydrants, we were breaking more water mains this last summer. Has anybody thought or tried to put forward some type of idea how we're going to address this going forward? Is there any plan?
Yeah, there is a plan, a regular line replacement plan. Some of these you have to inspect because some of them they can actually line on the inside, saving the cost of digging it up if it's underneath a roadway or if it's in people's backyards. So there is a replacement plan and funding for that. Again, as you know, there's regular maintenance on every one of our agendas for changes that need to be made and updates and purchases at our water treatment plants and our wastewater treatment plants. And a lot of those, you may have noticed, is having an additional part on hand or an additional pump that's been refurbished. And you look at some of those numbers and go, $70,000 to have a pump, a spare pump ready to go. And you get out there and it's a huge pump and you need a crane to move it. But if it's not there, then you're gonna be dumping right into the river untreated water. So, these things are, readily available, and we do have an ongoing maintenance program.
Thank you. Mayor?
Yes.
Jim, just a question when it comes to the water sewer, and it might be for you, or it might be for J.E. Jim Egan, you know, certainly we have a lot of expenditures over the next 10 to 15 years between the CSO and other improvements on an aging system. So we want to save every penny we can. Now we've expanded, or will expand, to another sewer crew, or water crew. You and I have had discussions. Are we doing what we can to analyze these bills to make sure we're doing everything in-house that we can? Because it's much more effective when we can do it in-house than it is to contract it out. Are we going to be keeping an eye on that?
Yes, we are. A lot of the contracting that we do, again, as you know, we've added a third crew.
Right.
But when we contract out, it's for safety situations where we don't have the equipment, or where we can't shut off the water to the hospital. You've got to do it while the water is flowing. And some of that, we've even got in line doing some employee training, so they will be able to do that. And then we won't even have to contract out for that kind of valve replacement or repair.
Okay.
Jim?
The parking fund is very important to us. As you said, it's part of the downtown plan. We are looking at the parking system as a whole, but also as different pieces. We are not recommending to increase the fees. We're also looking at keeping the service levels the same. But we're going to have to put more money into it. We're looking at a 15% increase. And we are projecting a deficit of $356,000. And this budget does not include any capital improvements to our parking structure. Once the parking study is done, we're going to have to come back to council and revisit the parking fund as it operates now. Clearly, the fees are not enough to cover the operating expenditures, plus what we need to put into our capital. And once we get the study, we can put a long-range plan in front of council, and we can look at the parking system itself in more than just a one-year picture.
Your Honor.
Yes.
Jim, with respect to the parking fund, I mean, just a basic question. I can see you're running an operating deficit here of $356,000. Do you have any fund balance to cover that for 15, or are you going to have to draw on the corporate fund, or how you plan on?
The parking fund will be able to cover that in itself. Right now, it has about $800,000 in liquid assets. That means cash or investments that can be drawn on. So if we use $356,000, that will roughly use about half of it. I think by this time next year, we'll have a more comprehensive idea of where we want to go with our parking system as a whole. And I mean specifically, I've heard from council tonight, our downtown parking.
Thank you.
Mayor? Yes. On the parking issue too, something I thought about. At our current levels, and as we hopefully increase the usage of our parking facilities with the multimodal when it rolls out in 2016 at full capacity, has anyone looked into using kind of like I mean, it's a smaller marketing platform. Has anybody looked at sponsorships and advertising for those that actually come in there, for companies to advertise that the company's coming there as an additional revenue? I mean, it could be something as simple as sponsoring a deck, a block of parking spaces, kind of like when you go to the grocery store and you have to look at those advertisements the entire time you push the cart around.
Yeah.
Has anybody looked at trying to leverage the number of people, and hopefully it grows, that use our facilities in a way to leverage that for advertising?
I don't know. I don't think they have.
Can we put that on the list to
Sure.
look into? Thank you.
This demonstrates basically where our separate revenues come. Our parking decks take in about 38%, but we also, have parking on the street and the lots. And it shows the various areas where our parking revenues come from. As you can see by this graph, most of our expenses are going towards operations.
How many employees do we have parking? Do you know? Top of your head? Anybody can answer that? Pardon me?
2 full-time, about 10 part-time
Thank you.
employees.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, my presentation is over with. I'd like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to present this budget. It's very comprehensive. As I said, every line item and every fund and every division is in this budget. Should you have any questions, either specifically or individually, you can always call my office or make an appointment, and I'll talk about governmental budgeting until you want to run and scream.
Thanks, Jim. Good job. Appreciate it. Nice presentation.
If I can just review issues on the long-term horizon again that I've presented last week, and that is that we do have to replace the rest of the portion of the platform roof over at Union Station. We've got $130,000 grant funds, but it'll be at least twice that. We're talking about the fiber optics in the downtown, implementation of the Camaros Downtown Development Plan, the comprehensive parking plan, as we've talked about this evening. The fact that funding personnel is an annual reoccurring expense, whereas our capital expenditures are one-time expenses. And you see that our budget is 80% personnel. And the more personnel you have, the less there is for capital, for training the employees. And as you see, I'm only recommending half of the fleet that was recommended to be replaced, and so we do need to address our fleet needs as well. You've seen what we're doing with our solid waste expenses, and that we need to address that for the next couple of years, that we have this known increase in that contract. And it was presented, although we're using a big portion of undesignated fund balance, and we still have a good reserve. We can't use that size every year after year, without really eating away at that fund balance and getting into a precarious situation.
Okay. Any other comments?
Mayor?
Yes.
I just had 2 comments. One thing goes back to what several of us were talking about, and I think Councilman Oderkirk brought it up, and did eloquently say that, we got a quarter loaf, with our police presence, but not quite the full loaf. And certainly one of the most important things downtown that will do any kind of a turnaround that's possible is going to be safety, police. So I certainly, when I talk to you, Jim Hock, that's the other thing too, maybe we get an ordinance that we can't hire any more Jims. You're confusing me. But Jim, when we talked, I told you I really wanted to see at least 6 police, and you came through with 4 additional on top of the 1. So we still have a ways to go. I'd like to see some, yourself and maybe the command, the chief, look into coming up with a plan to utilize overtime, not just for special events, but downtown, whatever is considered strategic downtown in the hotspots. Keep track of that overtime too, because if we do this towards the end of the year or after the mid-year, we certainly have to look at what was spent down there, and then if we can, we have to see if we can make that difference up if we need it for an event that comes up. But do you understand what I'm kind of saying, Chief or Jim? Kind of get together a program, and at least we can do something of that nature to increase the downtown and see if there's a real return, which I believe there will be, as we continue to try to hire more. That's my suggestion on that. And the other suggestion I had is, we had some short but interesting discussion about the newsletter. At this point, I would suggest that we send the newsletter, whether you want to approve it or not on the budget, I would suggest sending it to the CTIS committee. That's what we do, communications, and let us vet it out and maybe take a June 1st target date for whatever can or can't be done. That's my only comments, Mayor.
All right.
Mayor?
Yes, Terry.
Yeah. I know we talked about the newsletter a lot tonight, but I was just sitting here and Councilman Hug had brought up about the advertising in the parking deck. What about advertising to cover some of the costs, if not all, for the newsletter? Because it would be strictly City of Joliet news that'd be sent out.
That can be part of it, but I wouldn't, maybe a quarter page or a half a page an addition, because you don't want to turn it into what looks like an advertiser newsletter, that it's solely funded, and then you wonder if it's from the city, actually. So we don't want to go too far with that. But yes, there are those possibilities.
Okay. And also, I just want to make my opinion. I don't know how much is worth about the police officer, but the NOPT I think is very crucial to get that back to where where it would be. I think it'd be helpful for some of the situations that has been happening. Some. It's not going to solve all, as was said tonight, but I think what's also important is to get them back into the schools. And I think Chief might be able to speak on this. I believe they used to be in the schools. And I guess it was a study done by someone that as often as a young child gets in contact with a police officer in a good way, that it would help as they get older. And I think that would definitely be helpful. I think there's several things that need to be done. It's not one thing going to solve, the problem. As it was said tonight, put police on each corner would help. But I knew that would be, out of the question budget-wise. But I think those were my couple points. But I do want to see this 22,000 mail machine. What does that do? The mail machine? You just put a stamp on it, or? I could do that. I mean, I was just curious. I mean, is this for the letters to be mailed out?
Correct.
Okay, all right. I'd like to see it when we get it. Thanks.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Okay. A couple comments. First of all, I'm glad that we're finally going to get a maintenance schedule going on, because we've needed that for a very long time, and I was talking about that for some time. And I would echo Councilman Morris's and everybody else about the NOPT, very important. We need it, so somehow we have to find the revenue and the money to do it. Very important for our town and our citizens. And on a side note, Scott Kinsella, we had tentatively set up a meeting for Thursday for CTAS committee. Is that not going to happen? Because I never got back. You never got back to me.
No, it is scheduled for a meeting in this room Thursday morning. Notice has gone out.
I just got an email,
Okay, because I didn't.
Yeah.
So we are having. So let's put that on the agenda about the newsletter. Okay, thank you. And thanks for all your hard work, Jim.
Yes.
Thank you.
Coming in cold turkey. You did a great job.
Betty?
Go ahead.
First, I'd like to thank the staff for this is a lot of work gone into it, and you could have made that print just a tad bit larger, but I made it through. But I certainly want to echo Councilman Morris's and Quillman's point about our NOPT officers and getting back and building those relationships in the community. Also, Chief, you run an awesome program with PAC Camp, and I think Councilman Morris, that could be very well too, to work with the kids during the summer, where our police officers actually are the camp counselors, and they really get a chance to interact with each other. So that's, hats off to you with the department on that. We certainly have to find some creative revenue streams to be able to get our public safety and up, and I know that public service is doing all that they can do, and so it takes all of us working together on this piece, and we will continue to comb through and try to find some areas in there where there is some monies that may be available. I still want to look at how do we invest our funds to see if we can get a better return. But I'm sure I'll sit with you, and you'll probably have me running out of the hallway too as we speak. That's Jim G. I'm talking to. So thank you so much for the presentation.
Councilman Grow?
Yeah, just one thing. I know that it's a concern, not only on this council, but really in the community with respect to fully implementing the NOPT program. The problem is always funding, and I think there might be some opportunities within this budget. I was just taking a look at our hospitalization and dental. Now, I recognize we're self-funded, so that's always a number that's difficult to nail down, okay? But if you do just a little bit of math, I think we're overfunded in this number. It could be anywhere between $1.5 million to $2 million, and if staff could look at that, I would appreciate it. The reason why I say that is back in 2013, our hard number, okay, for what we spent on hospitalization and dental was about $18.8 million. Okay, so that's a hard number, a good number. We've budgeted $20.9 million in 2015. So then if I take a look at the actual numbers we have through June 30th of 2014, and you kind of extrapolate that out a full year, that number is almost identical to what the 2013 number is, the actual hard number. It's about 18.8 million, okay? If you compare that to what we're actually budgeting, I think that number might be a bit overfunded, and I think those dollars could be used to possibly fund our NOPT and maybe some other programs here. Now, obviously that number, it's a zero-sum game with that number. If we're light, we obviously got to pay for it, right? Well, it's going to come out of our fund balance anyway. So I think we should consider, and I'm asking kind of staff to take a hard look at that number to see if, excuse me, I'm fighting a cold here, to see if 20.9 million is the number that we want to use. And again, I recognize that's a difficult number since we are self-funded here. But if I look at the actual numbers in 13 and extrapolating 14, it looks like it kind of upset Councilman Hunt. But
Maybe we
I'm
better
fighting.
keep the hospitalization up there.
I'm fighting the cold myself. But I think that's a number that we could look at because those are some large dollars. Again, it's a zero-sum game. Obviously, we have to, we have to fund that number. But I think if we're over budgeting, if we're overfunding right now, those dollars can be used elsewhere, and it possibly might get us our NOPT number. So those are my comments. I do want to thank Jim Gadotti. I think he did an excellent job with this budget for having not a whole lot of time to invest, but I think it was very thorough, and it was easy to read through. So I do want to compliment you on that. So, Jim, nice job.
Nothing? Is there we need to go in executive session for? Yeah. Yes. Sure, come on up. Name and address, please.
Randy Mihelich. I live at 409 Rookery Court in Joliet. In the proposed 2015 budget, there is an allocation for the Rialto Square Theater. I'd like to request that this allocation be made contingent upon the Rialto Board meeting with citizens concerned about the new marquee. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
You're welcome. John?
Good evening. John Sheridan. Georgine told me to go easy on you, Mr. Mayor. And after the opening remarks today, oh, don't lay back. Don't hold back? All right. No, I'm just kidding. But actually, you took some of the thunder out of the speech tonight with the additional NOPT. We truly appreciate it. Your hard work, the staff, council, supporting NOPT. All of you have said that tonight. But I took your challenge, Mr. Mayor. In the Herald News, you said, find a way to get us some money, come up with some new revenue, etc. And I think I've done that for you. But first, I'd just like to say it was our understanding back in that time frame that when you said you're going to reestablish NOPT, it was going to be at full force. Shame on us for not asking that question. And it's been a couple of years, so we had expected it to be built into the budget incrementally, and it wasn't. So our neighborhood echoes that concern, but our neighborhoods are very appreciative of what you did so far. I have to echo some of your concerns, Councilman Odekert, about Joliet. With the murders and shootings that are happening, I think there was 9 murders since May, not counting numerous shootings, including your funeral home. I think you took a few bullets too, sir, in your funeral home. Joliet is starting to look like a little Chirac. Just another article in the paper the other day, December 5th, according to the FBI crime data, Joliet is listed as one of the top 25 most dangerous cities in 2013, based upon statistics. I know statistics you can kind of maneuver a little bit, but I think we should be concerned about it because we do see what's going on. We always have excuses for not being able to hire police officers, but we're very creative for finding ways to hire firefighters, like SAFER grants, I believe was the term we used, and I think maybe I have an idea to look for grants for other people.
Can I address that? The chief applied for grants
Great.
for the fire department, and they weren't eligible.
Okay, super. And I'm going to make a suggestion on that, Mr. Mayor. You had asked about, advocates for more police needs to suggest ways, so on and so forth. Fair enough. First, I kind of echo what Andy said. Let's start by not giving the arrogant general manager, Rialto, and the chairperson $600,000 subsidy until they listen to the voice of 1,000 taxpayers about the marquee. Let them find money elsewhere. If they don't need our opinion, then they don't need our money. Plain and simple. But on a side note, I find it interesting, the marquee was really held together with wire and duct tape. Why were people standing on it during the parade and during Mardi Gras days? Just a thought. Second, sell the ballpark. There has been discussion about that. I think you maybe need to look into it. You can't keep pouring good money into bad money. No businessman in Joliet would run a business like that. Basically, you allowed the Slammers to play for free last year. According to some newspaper article, I think it was the Joliet Times Weekly, projected expenses $370,000 with a revenue projected to be $200,000. Something's wrong with that math. Again, running a business. Third, hire a consultant, a grant writer, whose salary would be based upon what they bring into the city with federal and state grants. No expenses to the city at that point. It'd be a win-win. There are retired professionals out there that may sit there and try to work out an arrangement, allow them to say 2%, 1%, whatever, of a grant. Could possibly help the city find some extra revenue. In addition, fourth, eliminate the subsidy to the Joliet History Museum. That's $275. If you're not making money, then we need to find somebody who can make money in that business there. Old Chinese proverb, insanity is doing the same thing the same way, expecting a different outcome. And that's about what we're doing by dumping money into these businesses that continually lose. They just keep their hand out. We need to somehow eliminate that. I don't know too much about this one, the fifth one, but this Andrews Company sales tax rebate of $150, how many more years does that go on? I know it was to attract the business back in maybe 2005 or something, but how long does that go on? A little bit of research I did. Sixth, start looking to subcontracting some of the city services. I know we do it for snowplows, some situations, because our trucks can't get into cul-de-sacs. That's, but there's other services we may be able to subcontract to save some money. This one, I want to see how many squirm in your chair. On that topic, Joliet employees are paid approximately 20% more than any other city employees elsewhere in our surrounding areas. By my best guesstimates, we could save $2 to $3 million a year if we set up a two-tier wage system. Now, I'm saying grandfather the existing people that are working for the city, but as the attrition takes place, they die, quit, or retire, look at a two-tier wage system with competitive wages and benefits. And that'll reduce some of our expenses and our salary, which is a large part of our budget. I could give you more suggestions, but what bothers me, I don't think you're listening. And as an example, the training ground, I suggested to you at a council meeting that for demolition of properties in Joliet, get with your local union officials, which you all are endorsed by and all know, and ask them to do this as a training ground for their students rather than just sitting down at the Wilmington site. Possibilities save thousands and thousands of dollars a year for the city. But we turned around last meeting and spent $27,000 to demolish a house on Shelby Street. folks, you sat there and uttered, that's a great idea. Never heard of that before. That might be something to look into. I doubt if anybody can honestly look at me in the eyes tonight and say you looked into it and you're working on it. So it kind of turns people off when you say to them, give me ideas and suggestions, and we tell you to think out of the box. Councilman Morris, you're absolutely right. We all belong to organizations, and advertising does pay for your flyers. Quarter page, no. The whole flyer. You get that whole flyer paid for with $38,000. You have a lot of contracts with a lot of business in Joliet, and you can twist a lot of arms, kind of influence a few people to kick out a few bucks for an ad, or a full-page ad could possibly pay the whole thing. And just put a disclaimer in there, folks, this is paid for with advertisement to defray the cost to the citizens of Joliet. We would greatly appreciate that. We would consider that good work by you if you did do that. I wouldn't be bothered by the ads, because if I want to shop at those stores, I would shop at them. If I didn't, I wouldn't. But those are my suggestions to you, Mr. Mayor, to fully implement the NOPT. But again, we're grateful for what you did, but it should be, based upon the trouble we're having in the city of Joliet, fully implemented and as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for your comments. That's it. Is there a motion going executive session for?
No, Mayor, one more question.
Sure.
Jim, can we go back and look at the summer staff? How did we leave that? What was the conclusion of that with
The summer staff?
with the and I just want to make sure that I'm clear.
Sure.
The arteries coming in by the mall, coming in off by Holbrook, coming down 52, coming in off Chicago Street, Briggs Street, coming down
I'll
Collins.
take all the people they can give me.
Right. But I think you got to put in
And I'll find jobs for them, believe me. There are plenty of areas, you know, as I said, we had the tree inventory and the crack sealing program in place that we actually hired people. If I could get that labor for free, use that funding, I'd have kids out there, you know, there's grinders where you've got small rises in the sidewalks that you can grind it down rather than replacing the whole slab to make sure it's easy flow. There's a whole bunch of positions I can have people work in. So
But I guess
if we
my
can't, if we
concern-
can't get those students, we do have the funding for the continuation of the crack sealing and the tree inventory program. And I will work with the City Center Partnership on making sure we've got some seasonal people all day long in our downtown area to make sure it's cleaned up.
I guess my concern is we keep grasping thin air for volunteers. Okay, I think again we need to look at finding seed money so we could take our local kids that are out of school and put them to work. You can implement
that is
a
what we've been
non-paid
doing.
position. I mean, we couldn't even hire individuals to do tree inventory and advertising at the salary. I think that the council in this budget should also look in an Operation Curb Appeal and start cleaning up. We're hearing it from our businesses, we're hearing it from our residents.
With all due respect, I don't think we're grasping at air. If I remember correctly, Pam Owens from CCP had, I don't know how many people from Joliet Job Corps helping downtown, helping clean up. So we have utilized them before, and like I says, at the breakfast we went to, they says they would pay them. Just let them know what we need.
Right.
Yes.
And if we can't come up with some arrangement with the Joliet Job Corps, then I'll, you know, propose to you something for specifically the downtown area for the spring, summer, and fall.
But we can't forget about the high schools and the local college.
Sure.
too.
That's true.
Yeah.
Quick question on that. You know, you had brought up the tree inventory program we did last summer.
Yes.
And you're talking about the intern type program. Okay, we actually didn't have one because we waited too long to advertise. We're told that it should be advertised in December. We're in December. Are we advertising to the college kids who are majoring in horticulture and forestry?
I can check on that.
Yeah, we need to check because otherwise we're really not doing a tree inventory. We're just hiring people, I don't know, be laborers over the summer. But let's not call it a tree inventory program if we're not going to do it. The reason we didn't get it last year is we didn't put it out until February. And we had this discussion last year amongst ourselves, and you had just gotten on, Jim. A specialty like that with a small group of pool of people, we were told that you need to have it out in December. That by January, students, the very limited number of students specializing in that with their majors, whether it's forestry or horticulture, are all cherry-picked. So let's not wait until February, March again.
Right. Okay.
Is there a motion to go in executive session for personnel?
So moved.
At which time we will adjourn.
The motion seconded to go into closed session to discuss personnel, collective bargaining, land acquisition or conveyance, pending or threatened litigation, after which meeting will be adjourned. Councilwoman Gavin?
Aye.
Councilman Girl?
Aye.
Councilman Hug?
Aye.
Councilman McFarland?
Aye.
Councilman Morris?
Aye.
Councilman Otterkirk?
Aye.
Councilwoman Coleman?
Aye.
Councilman Turk?
Aye.
Mayor Durrani?
Aye.
Motion carried.